Hello, everybody. I just had the absolute pleasure of inter interviewing. Stupid. I've just had the absolute pleasure of interviewing Ben Garwood. He's former Parachute Regiment Pathfinder, uh, SAS 22 SAS. The guy's the real deal. Great guy. He is the owner of HR4K. He is the creator of Groundhammer. He's got a vast amount of projects going on in his life. One of which is a YouTube documentary called Own It. Check it out on YouTube. Own It by HR4K. He's also got projects coming on in the future. They're looking at a thing called the Artisan Rifles, which we're going to talk to with Ben in a moment. And that's basically a project of ex-military and military personnel, a collective all coming together with their different art forms and doing something. What it is at the moment, I'm not too sure. I don't quite know, but we're going to find out as time goes on. Ben was a phenomenal soldier when he was in, and I want to get the download from his time from 2 Para through Special Forces and then to becoming a CEO of his own business, HR4K. Stay tuned, check it out straight after this poem coming up right now. This poem is called Darkest Nights by Sean Bishop. In the end, no amount of encouragement will drive a man to his limit. Only a few good men have it in them to carry on when everything else is telling them to stop. The weak will run from danger or seek refuge by public protest or in some shameful silent hiding place. A soldier in the gravest of situations stands before comrades and enemies, stripped naked of false bravado or empty reputation. Lesser men, protected, safe and untried, stay at home, ignorant or fearful of finding their true measure. Many men will be ashamed of what they discover when exposed in moments of stark terror or endless creeping dread. But a brave few can be justly proud of how they acted when times were tough. Remember, only on the darkest of nights do we see the brightest of stars. So march on, young trooper, and have no fear.
So, a quick question. So, I asked you before, how did you get in, or how did you get back into art and the arts? Because that's a big passion of yours, isn't it?
So it's a really sticky point for me. It was more like poetry. I used to like poetry when I was a young lad, and it sounds like very soft and very,
No?
I don't well, to some people it does. And people would make comments about that, being like, "Oh, what are you up to, you loser, listening or watching or looking, reading poetry or writing poetry or whatever." Anyway, I wrote a poem whilst I was out on tour in 2008, and it was a really good poem. I thought it was really good, but I didn't tell anyone about it at all. I was just like, everyone's gonna think I'm a loser. 18, 19, whatever age I was at the time. Wrote this poem, didn't tell anyone about it, and then about 5 years later, I just thought, fuck it, I'll post it on Facebook. So I posted the poem onto Facebook and had so much good feedback, so many cool responses. And two lads actually got it tattooed on the ribs. One of them was I don't know if you remember Griff from Machine Guns.
Yeah.
He ended up getting the poem tattooed down his ribs, and it had a really good feedback from it. So I started writing a few more poems and stuff like that, and I've just kind of got back into it. But sometimes I like to do like maybe poems that are a bit political, but I can't obviously voice that too much because I'm still in. So
Yeah.
So a lot of my on the podcast, I try and speak to people and let them be as vocal as and as engaging as they'd like to be, but I have to sort of tame it in, and I've got like a little disclaimer at the end of the episodes to say their opinions are theirs, not mine. So yeah, just in case
I don't
somebody.
think there's even in the I don't think there's anything wrong with having opinions. It's healthy to have the opinions. I think sometimes I think people can mistake opinions with people trying to be overly subversive. And what they're being with being overly subversive is they're actually trying too hard to make a statement, which is more reflective about themselves than it is about what their opinion with the issue. And you see that often with, certainly we're seeing it quite strongly with left-wing politics at the moment, where it's actually driven to hate, especially against the man or the situation, as opposed to really looking at how that can be combated, or even just simply engaging with it and discussing it. So I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think it's completely healthy. It's interesting with I'm doing a little bit of work hopefully in New Year with a friend of mine who's an artist from London called Anthony McEwen, who runs a company called Rugman and Rum Knuckles. And we're looking to start this thing, which I think I mentioned to you, called the Artist Rifles.
Yeah.
Interesting enough, the Artist Rifles was an organization that was set up in the late 19th century by British poets, British sculptors, British artists. And they were incredibly patriotic and they loved their country. But they also understood that, that they are still, leaders within the arts, and it's interesting that you've got these guys, which later Artist Rifles became 2-1 SAS. But it's interesting, you've got people who love and enjoy the things that you do, but were still prepared to fight for their country. This isn't new.
No.
Sadly, the culture within the arts is it's become stereotypical that you have to be left-wing and subversive to be an artist. Well, it's almost cliche.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure. There was a famous speech. I don't want to say who made the speech. I'm sure it may have been like Churchill or someone like that said, "If it wasn't for art, what would be the point in fighting?" Because that is our culture.
Yeah.
So that's
I completely agree. Yeah, it's everything around you and everything that you love. I mean, you even when people be subversive about the countryside and the way it looks. That's through art. That's through people dedicating their time and their skill and passion to create beautiful landscapes and the hedgerows and everything else. But it also has lots more meaning behind it, and it's a bit like Ali-ness was for you and I. To be Ali has to be functional. To be Ali was also about creating something and being able to achieve what you needed to do and functionality. And I think that is also with art. You're creating something amazing, but you're also doing something with it, So,
yeah.
I think it's quite cool.
It's just even like the mental health benefits of expressing yourself and being able to, be true to who you are will make you perform better as the person that you are into the world. And if all of the things that are sitting around us now have all come from somebody expressing themselves and designing something and going through that process. And if nobody had done that, we'd be still sitting in caves somewhere. But I think that's quite interesting what you say. It's kind of like modern day society has this confusion between masculinity and femininity and what each one means. I mean, back maybe not even that long ago, the Parachute Regiment would have had a choir. Lots of other regiments throughout history would have had, choirs and singing groups and celebrated art and stuff like that. Whereas today, in some ways, it's seen as a little bit left wing to be in that regards in some people's eyes. I wouldn't say in my eyes, because I think what it is to be masculine is just to do whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah, quite agree.
But respectfully, obviously. And if that means for you to be open and honest, wear your heart and sleeve, and just say this is me and this is what I'm into, then you're being the masculine version of yourself. So that's what it's about.
Yeah, you see it in many cultures, in many jobs. You saw it with chefs for the master, the masters at chefing. The greats were often male, but yet cooking and everything is seen as a feminine thing to do. So yeah, I completely agree. I think people just latch on to these things. Going back to my point is, it's almost as if they're making a point and using these things to side with their argument. And in fact, most of us really don't give a shit.
Yeah. 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 You're right.
We just kind of crack on, But yeah, what we're looking to. Sorry about this. These things never sit in my gammy ears. What we're actually looking to get people together who are inspired by military art and enjoy art, or are military and are into art, all forms. And look at, I don't know, it's very early days, but the concept of getting creative thinkers together. Um, I won't drum on about the same things I always do in these in these sort of in podcasts and meetings I've had with people, but ultimately it's the thinkers and the doers that become the leaders and the driving force. If you think about it, if you didn't have someone who had the ability to think outside the box, you would never have the SAS. If you didn't have someone who could think outside the box, you would never have someone creating the parachute regiment or the commando forces or anything else like that. We would have been stuck as toy soldiers being swept up by field marshals and into dustpan and brushes like we see in Blackadder.
Yeah.
And I think certainly for a creative side, for me personally, I've always said that for me it was always about, I was never career minded. I was never driven by my career. I was driven by the need to create or be involved. And for me, I found that my medium that I enjoyed and my outlet in military was being in a position where I was able to have some form of effect. And that was essentially being on the estimate, being there, coming up with ideas at the table and being listened to and being appreciated, and also maybe those ideas come to fruition. Which, I mean, if you can see your work and what you've created come to life and it has a positive effect, isn't that fucking epic? So I suppose art for me, I still took an artistic form in my way of thinking when it came to soldiering. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's like the right man in the right job at the right time to create the
Yeah,
situation for success, and it doesn't always have to be
exactly.
the standard situation or the standard
No, and
SOPs.
also sometimes you have to put yourself forward if you think you are the man. I think because um, I think the way the military is set up is that you're not always posted and promoted into the job because you're the right person for the job. You're posted and promoted into the job because that job needs filling. And I did a podcast with Jack Carr, who's just done the terminal list. And we talked about it then, and he's an ex-officer. And we talked about it then, and we said that I think certainly for organizations, and I will talk about parachute regiment and special forces. I think we first of all chose those organizations. So we volunteered for those organizations. And we were driven by the mission rather than the process. And but the army, the way the military works, is the military works based on process, because ultimately it has to get the lowest common denominator to the edge to the battlefield, and they have to go willingly into battle on behalf of a class system, a country, etc., or a campaign. So ultimately, it's created that way, and because it's created that way, it ensures the mission is always successful by purely just throwing the process at the problem. Where organizations like ourselves, where we are thinking soldiers, where we are often without the support and the logistics needed, that is the comfort of the wider army. We're more driven by the mission than we are driven by the process. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's 100% makes sense.
And I think if you don't get that need, I think you can leave the military quite disgruntled, because actually what you haven't got a chance to do is shine. you know, and show that you are fucking good enough to be to be there, you know. And
Yeah.
instead, you look around at these fucktards who did, you know, 18 months or a year at Sandhurst. You know, they bluffed it into there, and now you've got a Rupert that's been in 2 minutes that has more clout than you have.
Yeah, it's
That's not fair.
sad state of affairs sometimes, and I know a lot of stories, you know, that have come out of recent conflicts that, you know, maybe I shouldn't talk about, but where the bad decisions were made, where as a young private could have had a better thought process, but was told to keep his neck, wind his neck in, basically. But, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, and that's at the fault because well, you know me from old, and I think, you know, I remember my 2IC was a better soldier than me. My 2IC, hands down, better soldier. A later became RSM 2 para John Willis, hands
good man.
down. But without, I felt comfort in having someone who was like him on, you know, supporting me. Ultimately, it was always my decision, but I knew I could depend on that person, and I knew that I had the confidence in my own self to go, well, actually, I need to listen to what he fucking says. He's got a better idea than me. Do you know what
Yeah,
I
fair.
mean? But again, the process isn't designed for that. The process is sometimes designed that actually, you know, you will keep marching forward, or you get shot in the back by a Rupert. You know, that's
Let's see.
ultimately what it was set up for, and it hasn't changed really in, you know, hundreds and hundreds of years. Obviously, the way we do battle, and the way we, you know, culturally we're different, but ultimately the process hasn't really changed.
The sort of mission specific training or specific training, um, mission specific training rather than the individual's training. So you take Fizz, for example, everyone from Parachute Regiment, the SAS, is expected to have a fitness level that is like an athlete. However, they're
Mm-hmm.
not fed or treated or equipped the same way as an athlete with, you know, coaches and mentors and nutritionalists. It's because it's not the individual that needs to be at that athletic state. It's the mission outcome that needs to be in that state, and that's why
Yeah.
the tabs and the events aren't best for you as a person, but they're best for what the mission outcome is later on down the line.
Yeah, I was at Headley Court in 2009. I got badly injured in 2009 from an accident on Salation. Um, I recovered really well. I recovered within sort of a year, 18 months, and I was back on ops pretty quick. Um, I was lucky, I was driven, and I had good people around me to get me to that point. But when I was on the wards at Headley Court, if there was an officer on deck, so if there was an officer on the ward, uh, then we were eating fillet steak. Fact, we were eating beef Wellington, right? Now, this is guys and girls who've got no fucking legs. Some of them got no arms. Some of them have got one arm. Some of them have just got like a finger and a thumb. You know, they're feeding these. This is run by people like Sodexo, and this is supported by Headley Court at the time. And they couldn't comprehend that nutrition was massively important. The only time we got really high protein food is when officers came on deck. You know, well, the rest of the time we were eating pork cutlets and chips and sausage rolls and things like that. Now, you think about these boys and girls who can't move as much as they did. They now put massive amounts of weight on and everything else like that. They're not burning it because they can't. But again, the system and the process was still there, and culturally was still there that officers need more sustenance than the blokes. You know, there was a guy called Fraz that was in 2 para with us, and he quoted quite a good thing out in Afghan 2001 or something like that. It was, forgot your man's name now. The old brigadier of 16 Brigade. Oh, I forgot his name now.
Lorimer?
He, sorry?
Was it Lorimer?
No, before. Jacko. And he, when Jacko came into theatre, now the lads, 2 para lads, were on the same menu, rations, menu G or something ridiculous, you know, and for like 3 months, Jacko turned up and fresh food was laid on for him. And Fraz, I remember, on TV because Panorama was there, and he said Napoleon famously ate what his men ate, and it was quite cool because he said that directly onto Panorama, and it just shows you, it's just that bollocks of entertaining and this whole idea of officers having need for greater sustenance because they're meant to be leaders. I think it's just ridiculous. Anyway, going off topic there, but it's kind of ridiculous. But it's interesting. Thanks for getting back in comms again. It was good to hear from you. Really, it's been a long time, and it's glad to see you well.
Yeah, Andrew.
And I think it's brilliant. I think it's brilliant what that you've actually, got back into the arts, got back into stuff that you love, and you're pretty proud about it as well. And I think that's wicked.
I just think that
in fact,
when I was a young, when I was a young 18-year-old, and I'd written that poem, and I was, worried about fucking showing the lads in case they picked on me or whatever. I just know there's people in the block now that, they're drinking the beer with the lads, and they're putting on this front and being the tough guy. Which is great to be the tough guy when it's needed, but it's not needed all the time. And you can just be yourself. And if you don't be yourself as often as possible, you'll forget yourself, and that part of you will be lost, and you'll have to regain it somewhere else. And you'll be confused in that process of trying to re-find who you are. And everyone's going to be a civvy, at the end of the day, at some point. Yeah. So don't lose yourself.
And they also a lot of those people who think they're bloody hard and gob off about how hard they are. If you're that hard, you probably wouldn't be making all the noise, mate. Do you know what I mean? It's a pretty common trait for people who are lacking something, often a bit of self-confidence or whatever, to make all the noise and give it all the big one. In fact, any of those people I remember who were like that back in that, our time, I have no respect for them. I don't think anyone who does respect them. We only ever remember them for being mongs, Yeah. And I think they just hid behind that. I think people like yourself, myself, pretty confident in ourselves. Just on poetry, so a mate of mine called Sean Bishop. Do you remember Sean?
I think I know the name, but I can't picture the face.
He was in Snipers, and it was after we lost Lee Ellis in 2005, and he wrote a poem that went up on the wall for Lee Ellis, and we used the same poem for the eulogy for Lloyd Newell, who was in Pathfinders with us, and then was in the regiment and was killed sadly. And I'll send it to you, and then if you want to put a link to this, you're welcome to. It's fucking epic, and it almost says exactly what we just talked about. Then it's very much talks about the man in the arena. It talks about those Toms that just fucking suck it up and get on with it. It's almost like a military version of If. It's epic. It was quite chilling, and I think it was mega poignant for certainly someone like Lee Ellis, who went on tour injured, got himself physically fit again, and sadly was killed on ops. Yeah. When there were other people around him who were more airborne than the airborne, were making all kinds of excuses not to go on ops. And now you see them on shitty fucking Facebook pages with all the medals and the berries every single chance they get. And they did 2 minutes, and really they hid, when the chips were down. And I'll send it over to you. And it's quite,
that sounds perfect. Yeah, I could stick that. If possible, I'd stick that at the beginning of the episode. I'd had something lined up. So at the beginning of each episode, I normally have a poem, and then the interview, and then adverts at the end. But if possible, I'll do a reading of that myself, and then stick it up. More than merrier.
Absolutely. He wrote it just after Lee was killed, and we had it up in D Company Lines in Alamara, and then when Lloydie was killed, it just seemed so fitting, and that was all that was read at his eulogy just before we repatriated, and it was solid. I mean, to be fair, I read it at the eulogy. I think I must have rehearsed it about 100 times just to make sure that held it all in when we did it. It was pretty epic. Yeah, he done well. I mean, he's a well-read bloke, Fish.
Yeah,
You know,
it's
he reads a lot. He's well read. He's a very well self-educated man. You know, he's a clever bugger.
that's good. Yeah, any links like that, I'd be more than grateful to have. Yeah. Ben, so I've
Yeah,
got a few questions I wanted to check out to you whilst I've
go
got
for it,
you
bro.
on the line. Um, and it's more to do like your story. So going from two para PF Hereford and then HR4K.
Yeah.
Uh, so, and my main question would be sort of like during that process, what failures did you have amongst, within that time that you knew that you had to overcome to succeed and to have a good, a good business now that is really thriving?
Well, I wouldn't say it's. Actually, I struggle every day, if I'll be honest with you. I think it's because I've never really gone down a solid. I've never had a solid career structure when I was in the military. I joined Two Para in 1997. I did 2 and a bit years. I transferred to the REME in 1999. I went to an airborne REME unit called 10 airborne workshops, 8 field workshops. And then I transferred back again within 2 years. Same platoon, same section, went back to D Company 11 Platoon. And the reason why I transferred in the first place is because it was pretty boring back in the late 90s. Nothing was really happening. I was sick of doing the whole senior Tom, senior Crow type bullshit, um, on the bus, off the bus. Nothing was really happening. You were cutting your teeth on exercises as opposed to ops. We went to Northern Ireland. It was all right. It's pretty standard. I went to the MT, got my licenses and everything else like that. And I thought, actually, I could do with a career. I remember seeing a lot of the REME guys, a lot of the attached arms, and the ethos they had, the airborne ethos that they had was mega strong. You know, they really loved being airborne. Where I think for some of us as Power Edge, it was because it was a given. I don't think we truly embraced it as much as some of the attached arms did. I don't think we gave as much respect to our forefathers within the airborne units as some of the attached arms did. Um, and I loved the airborne side of it. I thought it was a brotherhood that I loved being part of. I loved the piss ups. I loved being part of something bigger than me. Where, as I said, I didn't really feel that in battalion. It was just almost like you're Power Edge, you're solid. You know, you're good. I don't mean you're solid, but you're good. Um, yeah, so I transferred the ring, and it just wasn't for me. I didn't like the idea of not being involved in something. I didn't like the idea of just working for someone else and you know not really fulfilling my role as a soldier. I transferred back. I transferred within 2 weeks. I was back in Parage within 2 weeks. Free badge, my cap badge. Well, back to my old cap badge. Same platoon, same section. I got called a crap at by my Power Edge mates. I got called a failed crap at by my REME mates, and I loved it. And it was mega. And I wasn't particularly shit, so I got on well with my peers, and I had a good run. I think when I came back, I was a multiple commander as a Tom, and then I was running as a section commander all the way through as Tom to Lance Jack, and then at that point there was a bit of a congestion within my peer group, so I ended up going back as the two IC for a couple of platoons, a couple of sections. Then I got my full screw, and again that's where I started tasting that responsibility and craving that responsibility. I That's where I didn't have enough. I didn't feel like I was getting enough um, return on what I was giving. So I thought I've got to do something. I went on selection. Sadly, I was unsuccessful. I think my body just wasn't ready for it at the time. I was fit. It was the same time, obviously, when I met you. I was fit. I was buzzing, but I just didn't have that endurance in me. However, as I said, I still craved the need to be on the estimate, to be involved in the mission and such like. So I went to Pathfinders, and I was lucky. I only did a short term in PF. I did 2 years in PF, and I was allowed to go on selection. And I went on selection, um, and I yeah, had a good run. You know, I what happened? I I got picked up for a safety in the trees on my first selection, um, and I didn't actually do anything wrong. The sear had gone on my safety catch. These are weapon systems that were used in the trees, constantly being fired, and the sear had gone on the safety. And as I put the magazine on, released the bolt, a burst went. Obviously, my finger was nowhere near the trigger. The sear had gone, and a burst went down the range. There was no way of proving it because obviously the amount of how much this sear had gone is quite hard to see. And my mate was the armorer at the time. The DS were cool. The DS were like, mate, we don't want to lose you. We want to keep you, so we're going to keep hold of you. We obviously what we've seen here is we can't ignore it, but obviously we don't think you're that unsafe. However, it's classed as a. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull you now. And they pulled me halfway through selection in order to not lose me, which was amazing. So I spent 6 months then within Stirling Lines and also down at St Athens, treading water essentially, waiting to get onto the next selection. So that was a real privilege, and the fact that it was kind of cool. It was cool to know that I wasn't shit and I didn't fuck up, and they had the confidence in me and they wanted me back and they wanted to keep hold of me. Yet they had to go through their due diligence, and their due diligence is making sure that obviously, if you are picked up for a safety, that needs to be identified. I went back on selection, and when I got on the range in the trees, all the weapon systems, all their sears had gone. Right, boom! Everyone was firing bursts down the range, and I was chuffed to fuck because I realised that it wasn't me, it was the weapon system. And I had a good run after that. I went on selection, did okay, and I fell off a building on the CQB phase. So I was abseiling. It was my second descent off the building, second descent, and I'd used a Black Hawk carabiner. Well, not my fault. A Black Hawk carabiner got mixed up with the DMR, and on my second descent, the carabiner came off, and I basically fell off the top of one of the main buildings within the training area here in Hereford. I put my femur through my leg, so my femur came through my leg, severed my patella tendon, and then had a non-union fracture of my ankle. So my right leg is about an inch shorter than my left with a limited range. But yeah, as I mentioned earlier, good recovery. Good people around me, and obviously I wanted to get into the regiment since I was a kid. So, and the regiment were amazing. They looked after me, they looked after my missus, and they got us back on track.
How do you handle
joining the regiment?
How do you handle those setbacks like that when you get those big setbacks and the emotional response to that?
I think the fact that I was still on the train, I think the fact that the regiment doesn't just get rid of you if if you show that you've got what's required. The regiment will support you. If the regiment thinks you can recover, it will support you. I mean, these are the top surgeons potentially in the world. They've got access to, you name it. These people would give you definitive answers on, if you're going to make a decent recovery, and the amount of money and time they've invested. They're not going to chin you off. And as I said, I was still on the bus, still on the train. I was just happy to be here. And I think because my career was always about me, and what I meant by that was I was always about doing what I wanted to do, as opposed to people just doing their career because it's about their careers and about their promotion. I was happy to be here. I was happy to carry on soldiering at my age and doing that stuff. And the chance to learn new skills, work with these organizations and these people, and it's epic. Sometimes you have to pinch yourself, and then after a while it becomes weirdly normal. You know,
It,
some of the places and things you do is something out of like fucking films and shit, but it becomes very normal. So, but the setbacks, yeah, how to deal with that? To be fair, as I said, I think just having good people around me and positive people around me, and being in an organization where, as I said, you're so driven by the mission instead of the process, that carries you, you know?
yeah, yeah.
You
You
know?
got to take yourself out of the equation and realize you're the cog that needs to be put back in place at some point, but isn't necessarily that. It doesn't have to be that cog. It could be another cog, but you want to be part of that machine and keep it
Yeah,
ticking over and keep it
100%.
running.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Good.
Yeah. It's, I think we were lucky. I mean, again, you know, I will say this. I thought I was going to promise myself not to. I've always said there's two types of people: tradesmen and craftsmen. That's the way we're defined in the military. A tradesman is someone who's great, follows the route, follows the template, um, does what's said on the tin. Probably great at giving lessons, um, and can follow great tasks. Very career minded often, but needs routine and needs direction. Where people like you and I, we're craftsmen. We like to create. We like to be on the estimate. We like to be involved in things, and we're driven, as I said, by the mission, not the process. We are, you know, the people who keep the world moving. We're the people who are looking over that blue mountain barred with snow. You know, we're the ones to see what's going on over the horizon. And I think going to organizations like the SAS and the Paras and the Pathfinders gives us that outlook. Also, if you are that type of person, people around you see that and they'll invest into you because they know you are a capable person. Now, there will always be a number of people that get into the regiment that are tradesmen because they were fit enough and they passed a number of tests. You know, selection isn't 100% accurate. It's 80%, 90% right. So you're still going to get a number of tradesmen, still going to get a number of people who are great at carrying kit, probably make very good platoon type sergeants. But most of us are craftsmen that come here. So we get given the opportunity and we crave responsibility. Because we've tasted responsibility, we crave responsibility. So a job gets given to us and we give it our best go. And I got that early on. I was given responsibility by my commanders, by my TLs, people I knew, given responsibility. And that made me want more responsibility. So as I then get on, I put my hand up. I volunteer. I ask for jobs and things like that.
I don't think I've upgraded my thing in a while, so I'm just going to see what happens. If it
All
drops
right.
off, I'll send you a quick other link, and then I'll link up with you again in a
Right,
moment.
I'll take the hint, dude.
No, it's not that at all. I've got more to say.
Let's have a coffee.
I just don't know what it's going to do. I'm hoping it doesn't just drop off. Uh, because
Yeah.
I
No,
wanted to
hopefully
go back
that's
to
kind of
your
answered there. Go on.
I want to go back to your time as Remy, because there
Oh,
was
yeah.
a I want to tell you a story, and
Yeah.
it's the story I think about whenever I see you or think about you, and I know you're doing great stuff now with HR4K with Groundhouse. The story I want to tell you about is dating back I was probably about 18, so we're thinking like 17 years ago now, and I've been tasked. I just got my driving license. Been tasked. You're in this Land Rover as a passenger, and the other guy was driving it. We're driving her in the back of the convoy, and as you know, Army Land Rover, the thing's rattling away. There's water just coming inside. Both wind mirrors had already folded up and flapped onto the inside of the vehicle. So we were just like, oh my god, this is carnage. And it started bellowing out a load of black smoke and like blah 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 blah. And eventually we started slowing down. The convoy just started disappearing. We're like, never, what's going to happen here? We pulled over into the hard shoulder. We were two 18-year-old lads in this car, never broken down, only just got a driving license, flapping away like, oh, we're going to get in trouble. We're going to get in trouble because you're broken down. And all of a sudden, this civvy car comes out of nowhere and pulls up in front of us. We're like, who's this guy? Some guy's just come over to help us. Out of the car steps yourself, comes wandering over like this mirage of a glowing
Yeah.
halo behind you. Like, who's this
Yeah.
guy? And you're like, you're right, lads. And we're like, oh, it's Ben Garwood. You're like, pop the hood.
Yeah.
And you pop the bonnet. You were under there doing something for a minute. And then you went, give it a go now. And it turned over. And we were like, oh my God, who is this guy? After that, yeah, right, I got to go, lads. And you walked off. You still there? You walked off, and when you got there, you got to your car and you looked back and you turned around over your shoulder, basically like the meme where the woodcutter and the woodsmith looks over his shoulder.
You know,
It gives the nod of approval.
yeah, but mate, I'm hoping my exit was as good as my entry.
No,
Probably tripped over and walked in some dog shit.
no, so you know the meme where there's the lumberjack and it
Yeah,
pans to the
yeah,
lumberjack and he looks over his shoulder and then gives that sort of like nod of approval.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
always
yeah.
that
No,
little meme's always reminded me of you.
no.
Of
Well, that's actually a guy called that's off Robert Redford film Jeremiah Johnson, which is an amazing film if you get a chance to watch it. He was one of the original Mountain Men. Um, they did some newer stuff, like the Reverend is one of the Mountain Men stories. Obviously, I look nothing like Robert Redford, but that one image, I'll take that. Yeah, I mean, anything else, I'll end up looking like I don't know.
you're
I have enough. I have enough double gangers to be fair. To be honest, mate.
your camera's off at the moment. I don't know. We dipped in and out a couple of times.
Yeah, there we go. I'm back in. Yeah, sorry about that. I actually lost you there for a second. I had to just get back in again.
I think you pressed, yeah. So you missed a little bit of the story, but it was basically the woodcutter giving the nod of approval. Can you do that for us, Ben? Can you
Yeah.
give us the little nod of approval?
Was it like this?
That's the one. Yeah, I've been craving that for a while. It's been
Oh,
about
mega.
17 years
Well,
since
I
I
mean,
saw that last.
I think it's good. Like, this is obviously you and I had a chat a couple of months ago with some ideas that you had, which I think is a brilliant idea. Um, and I think you should probably see that one through when you get a chance to do it. But I think it's good reconnecting with good folks, and I think that's something that I think people like you, I, and others, we will often levitate towards each other naturally. I think that the military is an organization where often it's a cross section of society where you're forced to hang out and be with a lot of people you wouldn't actually be with. But I think as you leave, you start levitating back to those people who are kind of your tribe. And I think certainly some of the stuff that you enjoy and I enjoy, like I said, the arts and stuff like that. There's certainly, yeah, you see that. In, I think many of the people that you and I know, it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's good to be the good guy in someone's story.
Yeah, yeah. I
Even
was going
after
to say the
17 odd years.
yeah, I remember it like because I was 18-year-old. I thought I was going to get on the shelf, and then you came out of nowhere and saved us with that Remy experience that you must have acquired.
I think to be fair, that must have been the only thing that pulled out of my ass. That probably was quite good. Don't ask me to do it again.
Yeah, yeah.
I wouldn't know what I'm doing. I've got a Land Rover myself. I think it's the fourth Land Rover. Moment something goes wrong, I take it straight to the garage. I haven't got a clue.
You're right.
I
You're
did
right about
enjoy
that.
though.
You're right about that. The different people. There's a vast variety of people that join the military. A lot of them are from, not all of them, but a lot of them are from deprived backgrounds, and they go into the army and they get kind of indoctrinated into this way of life. And like I was saying before, if you don't cling on to yourself, you'll lose yourself within that thunderstorm, and eventually you're going to be a civvy, and you're going to have to find yourself again. It's good, like you say, people like myself, like you. Other names I'd probably call would be Steve Steele, of Nick
Yeah,
Davenport
yeah. I was
with
with him yesterday actually.
oh
With
yeah,
Steve
yeah,
yesterday.
great
Yeah, yeah,
guy. Always has been, and
yeah,
always will be. He's fantastic. Some of the other guys you've I've seen Billy Billingham, Chris Ryan,
yeah,
Hugh Keir from HR Podcast,
yeah.
absolute
Top bloke.
legend. He's the reason I got into
Yeah.
podcasting. Basically,
Oh really?
I wanted to be Hugh.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think he's
yeah.
quality.
Huge queer. Yeah,
Yeah, I think he's mega.
yeah. He's
And
top bloke.
I see you on the. I listened and watched the interview you did with Jack Carr. Um,
Yeah,
it was probably about a month ago now, and his book that then became the TV series starring Chris Pratt. You're moving in some pretty good circles there with HR4K
well, that
and
was down. That was down to Billy, really. So, I mean, HR4K. I think I didn't really didn't know what we were creating when we first did it. I think I got to a point in my career where there was something missing. You know, a beautiful family, beautiful, healthy family, but in my job there was something missing. I don't know. I just needed something more. I need something more to keep me engaged. I set a company up. We designed and built some belt kit. There was a belt kit called Pilgrim, and it was I was asked actually to design the new belt kit for the training squadron. So I'm a bit of a kit pest. So I designed this belt kit. We did quite well, but unfortunately, I wasn't really working with a good team at the time to see it through to fruition. I fell out with what was there, then became my business partner, and I wanted to do something else. I wanted to carry on what we were doing. So I started importing a lot of the brands that we wear, you know, a lot of the sort of the tier one guys that we hang around with and ourselves and the sort of brands that we have. So I started importing these brands and selling them out of my garage. I didn't know what we were going to do with HR4K. We were sort of thought, well, we could be almost like a John Lewis of selling other people's products. In the background, we were doing a lot of procurement for sort of military, anti-poaching, security and defense stuff. Obviously, that we couldn't really talk about, and I was still serving at the time, so we couldn't really sort of come out about what we were up to. I was seeing around me, it was massively frustrating. I was seeing around me all these brands popping out all over the place. You know, they were literally making out they're all SF guys and all kinds of stuff like that. And they weren't. They blatantly weren't. And I felt really, really annoyed that they were dining out on the stuff that me and my mates do, you know? So I thought, well, what can we do? So we thought we'd create bricks and mortar, and bricks and mortar essentially what we created, the physical location HR4K, because you can't lie. You know what it is, a physical location. Online, you can pretend to be whoever you want to be, as you know, and you've seen the same people I have online talking shit, and you know you can make all this sort of shit up, and you can be this badass person because no one online is going to contest you. And obviously, if anyone does, you always come out worse. So we created HR4K, and it became over the years more of a physical LinkedIn than it has done as a revenue generator or as a business. And what it does, it has an amazing ability to bring people together from all different backgrounds. And because none of us have got anything to prove, we don't get Walter Mitty's through the door. We don't get freeloaders. We don't get bluffers. We don't have all these people that have got something to prove or an axe to grind. And we police that naturally by not really listening or caring for their bullshit. And because we get these good people that come through the door and they mix and they socialize and they share ideas, and we get people jobs, and we support welfare, and we support mental and physical health through that, but we don't make a point of it, amazing things happen. And these amazing things happen by people feeling better about themselves, people connecting, meeting new people, meeting, you know, wives, husbands, meeting you know, new employers, you know, new business partners. These things, amazing and magical things happen. So we found that actually the strength of HR4K became the networking ability. We, as I said, created a cross between, you know, Facebook with an Instagram look, but essentially doing the work of LinkedIn to a certain extent. That allowed me then to have the freedom to come up with the other ideas. And going back to my point before, where this need and desire to create, that's where we've come up with things like Ground Hammer and the comic that you've seen that we've started. We've got a couple other little projects that are bubbling away as well. A print house that we're sort of talking about doing. We're talking about bringing our beer back online, and lots of other really cool projects. So we don't really need HR4K anymore as a revenue stream or as a business, but we use it purely as somewhere to network and to enjoy with others. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I don't think you can really make an actual living out of something like that, because ultimately, um, you a culture has changed. The way we go out, the way we drink, the demographic we're predominantly targeting are people like you and I. So we work, so we're not really free during the day. So we have to work on sort of events and things like that. So um, yeah, it's not necessarily something you'd retire on, but it's certainly something that could create the foundations on something you could retire on. That makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. It's I went on your website earlier on today just to quickly do a bit of, check up what new stuff you've got coming out. And obviously you've got the new episode of Ground Hammer coming out, and all the other stuff you've got going on, the gym, the music events, the clothing,
Yeah.
Ground Hammer, the coffee, the beer. Like how are you finding all this time? Like,
Well, so the what I'm trying to do over the last couple of years. So predominantly that was all done on my own. Um, and what I did was I set those foundations up for those things. My mission really hasn't changed over the last few years. I'm still trying to do the same projects, but what I'm trying to do over the last few years is build teams to run these. Um, the challenge has been finding the right people to run these projects. That's the challenge. At the moment, we've got a good team around us. They need developing. They need to self-develop as well as they need to develop into what we want to achieve. I have to be prepared to accept that their views and the way they do things might be different to what my vision of HR4K is and some of the other stuff. And I have to be in a position where I can um, delegate and offload, so allow other people to take the reins on stuff. So that's my challenge at the moment. Over the last few years, I think I brought on, I don't know, 15 people in the last year or so. I've fired about six, and it's because they're just not as I said before, I need craftsmen, and I need a handful of tradesmen, just to do what we need to do. But yeah, so that's my plan. My plan now is to build these companies. Now we've established them, build these on these ideas, and then offload them, and then obviously slowly build them up, and then put them in their little groupings, and then hopefully each one of those groupings will create their own networks, and those networks would then bleed into the others and expand that and as such like.
you given any thought to expand into new locations or franchises or?
Yeah, so we tried, mate. So I tried that in Colchester, and sadly we just didn't we just didn't have the right person in there that was able to drive that business, or certainly the community type business that we had. We tried it. We tried it. Where else did we try this before? We tried it in Australia as well. And again, it's good people trying to help out here, but again, they just didn't have the vision or the ability to think outside the box, to think about how to generate revenue or how to build those networks. So it's really hard. It's really hard to get the right team unless you actually create a franchise model to do it. The problem with that is you'd end up losing the personal touch of what HR4K is. So what I was trying to do was look at how I could create HR4Ks that were indicative to the person who was running it. Yeah, so it was the person who run it that puts their personality in their traits. What I didn't want to do is set up HR4Ks in different locations. Me and Billy Billingham were talking about opening one in Florida. I've got some friends of mine, JTF2 guys, doing ones doing in Canada. And if I was to do that, I would want them to build HR4K, but around their personalities and their interests.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
It's being able to do that. that's the issue in
Yeah.
finding the right people to be able to do that.
Because you'd think like
Otherwise,
Catterick would be a nice,
yeah,
very military orientated place.
yeah. Again, but when you're dislocated from the location, you're relying on someone else to share the same vision and drive as you, and actually put that into practice. And unless you're there, sometimes cracking the whip, you're relying on ensuring you get the right people. And it's taken me, as I said, I fired 6 people in the last year to get me to a point where I've now got people I can actually trust and depend on.
It
Yeah, I mean
sounds
that's
like you've
the
got a
small
lot
business
going
level.
on. So to offload that to somebody else, it's got to, you know, it's got to be a lot to try and let it go in a way, to let somebody else run it for a bit. And like you say, if they've not got the same buy-in and passion for it as you, it can be a bit of a minefield of who you're going to pick to be that person to do it for you.
Yeah, I think there is a thing about I talk about it from a male perspective. Is there is for many of us there is a need and a desire to create and to own something, to have your name and your stamp on it. So sometimes asking someone to turn something that you've created and getting them to run with it is quite difficult, because essentially it's my vision, not theirs. So you've got to find a sort of happy medium where you've got someone who has the ability to drive and to share your vision, but is happy to realize that it's not actually theirs to
Yeah,
a certain
yeah,
extent. And that's where, as I said, I'm trying to come up with this idea of whether we can make these venues about them, but still send the same message. Is it sharing the same ethos that we're trying to
yeah.
portray? Um, look, I mean, with Groundhammer, for example, Groundhammer is an easy one. Um, yeah, that's it.
I've
There,
got a copy
that's
right
our
here.
trailer.
Got the
That's
trailer
it.
copy
So
right here.
that's our trailer, and then we're just about to release Saga. We've done Saga 1. We're about to release Saga 2.
So Saga
Um,
One is in my basket with a patch with the patch at the moment. It's my birthday in about 6 days, so I'll give you a little hint. I'll
nice.
I'm gonna if it doesn't come through from the missus, then I'm gonna get myself Saga
Yeah.
One and Two with a little
Well, yeah.
patch.
If you give it a couple of weeks, you just get to pick up Saga 2. Um, give us a nod, and I'll sort you out as well. Um, the so the ground hammer thing isn't too bad. So because the time it takes between each release, I can give my brother-in-law who writes the script. I can give my brother-in-law a direction of travel for what we're trying to tell the story about and those little bits and pieces. I've got a great guy called Mike Oxley who brings it all together and he edits it. And the artist is a guy called Phil Buckingham, who I found at Comic Con, and then he sort of cracks on as well. So a lot of these guys we can kind of let them run. Um, the Some of the other projects that we're looking at doing again, hopefully we should get them in a point where actually we can get the right team in to manage this all. I think what I like about Groundhammer, though, over HR4K, HR4K was great to create a physical location, and it goes back into the artistic side of being able to create something and put your own personality onto something. People go in there, they like what you've done, you've designed it, you've made it look. It's like when you do something in your house, or you do some cool shit in your garage. You like to show it off a little bit. That was cool, but it wasn't a brand. It didn't feel like a brand. It didn't feel like something where I can directly mold it, continuously mold it, and do stuff. So that's where Groundhammer was kind of really a really good outlet for me, an artistic outlet for me,
Yeah,
a creative outlet. Sorry, for me.
the out so the artistic sort of stuff that's on there is phenomenal. And when I first got this, I did a little post to say that I'd received it,
Yeah,
and a friend of mine said, "Oh, the artist is a good friend of mine." So it's like small world type of stuff. And
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
so if anyone's looking at buying this, it is incredible. The artwork inside is awesome. Tell us more about the storyline.
Okay, so Groundhammer quickly then. So Hammer is the AC 130 gunship. A few years ago, I was looking at creating a beer, which again, I'm looking at trying to get that back online over the next month or two. We were looking at creating a beer where we could proceeds back into the regimental association and support the boys and girls, and support the association that certainly supported me when I was injured, and also helped my boy when he needed some medical care. Um, so I created this beer. It took a bit of a back step a little while ago, um, but we always had it on the back burner. We called it Ground Hammer because we liked the idea of the hammer, the AC-130 gunship, which obviously was our guardian angel, and Ground Hammer was the nickname of a guy that I used to work with and look up to. Um, who was nicknamed the Ground Hammer because he was equally as devastating as the AC-130 gunship. And it's a fucking cool name. So yeah, created the beer, called it Ground Hammer, and then it kind of took a bit of a back step for a while. Some guys came back to me and said, "Look, we really like the beer when you created it. Do you mind bringing it back on again?" And one of the girls who used to work for me, a girl called Stacey, said you should do something with Ground Hammer. It's a cool name. It's got a cool brand. You should do something with it. So last Christmas, I started writing this story, and what I wanted to do was I wanted to create characters based on real people and real events, and stories about real events, and tell the stories of real heroes, but do it in a way that it was sci-fi and fantasy, so we don't give away, sensitive information. But at the same time, what we are doing is honoring those people and their sacrifices and such like. I also thought it'd be a great way of, while I'm creating the product, like the beer, depending on the sort of the target or the targeted demographic I'm trying to market the beer to, I can create a character based on that market. For example, if I was to get the beer up and running and I took it into Poland, I would create like a Grom character in the comic, tell some stories about some Grom guys and some heroic events that they've been involved in. And like 19 Crimes, I would then put a QR code on the can. I put proceeds into an association that supports them. And then obviously people can read stories about them. Also, it would give links to the website. And then I'd create, like a Pilsner type beer. In the UK, I'm creating a nice ale, an Indian pale ale that I like. And that one's going to be called Ground Hammer, based on Matt Lloyd, which is two names, Matt Tunro and Lloyd Newell, two lads who were killed, sadly, at my old place, both Power Edge guys. And proceeds of that will go to the SAS Association. I'm hoping in the future if we get there, we'll then like to go to the States. I create maybe a Delta type character or a Navy SEAL character, one of my friends, and then tell stories of their organizations and their history, and then put links back into this. That's kind of what we're doing with this. But the story, it's endless, really, because the way I've created it based on titans, planets, gone completely out there. And the characters are almost a bit like Highlander because they're really old, so we can go in and out and backwards and forwards and all different stuff with the stories. I think it's really exciting and have a lot of fun with it.
I was going to say it's not a story; it's a universe. And just from looking at the trailer sort of episode, you can straight away tell that this is so vast and broad that you could be on planet Earth for 1 minute, and the next minute there's this other thing going on a different planet, and it is very interesting. And I'm very looking forward to getting the next two sagas coming out.
Yeah. So just on that is, I like the idea of an alternative view on religion. I like the idea that a lot of religions have very similarities in them. Obviously, we understand the origins of Roman Catholicism and how that started. We understand the origins of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, etc. We understand how they started, but we also know how they're very linked to paganism. And then obviously how paganism, there are some sort of solid things within paganism, within the sun, and understanding that the sun brings life and growth, and where the sun sets, etc. And these carry through modern day religions. and they also carry through ancient religions. So I've always liked the idea that maybe we were visited, maybe heaven and hell are real places. That's the idea. Maybe they are real places. Maybe they're not naturally supernatural demons and everything else. That's just the way myths and legends are created to create order. But maybe maybe there are origins from elsewhere. And that's the idea in it. So we're sort of using that thing, but we're telling the missions. So the way it works is the characters and stories are based on real people and real events. The stories are using bad guys who we've seen out through history, through oppression, greed, and chaos. Kind of globalist type characters. The locations are based on real world locations linked to religion. So, for example, the next saga, which we've already advertised, is based on the links between the pyramids in Mexico and pyramids in Egypt. The idea that they share very similar gods, they were established somewhere around the same time. Obviously, Mayan, not Aztec, Mayan and Egyptian. And there's some real similarities in there. So I like the idea that maybe these are gateways to different locations and different heavens and hells, you know?
There's definitely a lot of people want to know why there's pyramids all over the planet, and how did these people communicate with each other? So I do, a new vision and a new view through a comic book to describe somebody else's thought process and why that may occur is really
I mean,
interesting.
there's no fucking science behind it. You know, I mean, like we know why people use pyramids because it's a solid structure. You know, if you're building out of raw
to
materials,
land a craft on.
You want something that's got a broad base, you know, and the higher you build it, you know, you've got to have a broader base. We know this, but I just think, you know, escapism is massively important to keep our minds ticking over, to allow us to decompress, to disassociate ourselves from the stresses and woes of like everyday life. You know, you need that. I remember, obviously, quite wrongly at times, but I'd come back from work. My missus would have had the kids all day, which would have been a nightmare for her because, you know, she's never got anyone she can really communicate with. But yeah, I would have had a busy day and I'd go and sit on the couch and I just want about half an hour to decompress, where my wife would want to talk and sort of that's her decompression to talking to me, where I just didn't want to talk to anyone. So for me, I used to watch, you know, fantasy kind of sci-fi programs for that half an hour to an hour when I got home, just because I can just zone out. And I love the idea of losing myself in something that was completely disassociated to real world. So yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, I did pick up on one of the things you said on your Jack Carr interview, and that was about how when you used to be envious of the guys that lived further out from camp, rather than when you just leave work and go straight to your accommodation or straight back to your marriage quarters, and the guys that could decompress along the journey. And I think you mentioned about your motorbike as well, and being able to be in your helmet and sort of away from technology and just ride your bike. I've got my my module 1 tomorrow. Jen,
good luck.
Doing module 1 tomorrow.
Nice.
Looking to get a Harley Davidson.
Yeah, I mean, I said as well, you know, things with motorbikes. We're hopefully this is you know, early days. I can't tell you too much about it, but we're looking to try and get a motorbike built for the comic as well.
Wow.
In real life, and motorbikes to me, I enjoy a bike. I don't know a lot about them, but I enjoy a bike. But motorbikes are brilliant because it creates community, it creates talking pieces, and it creates and brings people together. And I love the idea of that. And also, it's something you still just go up and go on your own. But you know, people go hill walking, people go out, people go and do survival weekends, people just go and play on the Xbox, people go and play, I don't know, Call of Duty, whatever it is. It's still escapism, you know, it's a chance just to decompress.
Yeah.
You know, me and my missus, we have talked about this, and it was wrong, really. My missus needed me at that time. And selfishly, sometimes you do need to take that time for yourself as well. You know, obviously you've got to come to some compromise between you within a relationship for that. So that was probably quite selfish of me. And obviously, I used to use the excuse that I had this quite important job or demanding job, and she would always give me the freedom to sort of get away with it a little bit on that. But yeah, I think that decompression is massively important for all of us in whatever we do, but just not too much of it, because
Yeah.
sometimes you still got to socialize and interact and realize that, you know, sometimes you're being a dick.
Yeah. And
You
I
know
think
what I mean?
that escapism is very to hand now with people on their mobile phones. So you see people doing that escapism probably a bit too much, but sometimes it's okay to be. Sometimes it's okay to be selfish, because when you allow yourself to be selfish for a little bit, it makes you more attentive when you're being selfless. So yeah, it swings
Yeah.
and roundabouts.
It's also sometimes there are people who are selfless majority of the time, and the moment they need that time to be selfish, it's often really noticeable
Hmm.
in them, and you know, it almost becomes a character trait. But some people just get away with being a dick continuously. They do something good and we give them praise. But
Yeah.
sometimes actually, you know, but yeah, it is massively important. And I agree. I've seen it with my daughter. You know, we let my daughter on the phone. She gets on the phone, but now and again we take it off because we can actually see her mood swings change.
Yeah. Same with mine.
And she starts being quite a little bitchy to her brother. You can see she gets in all moods. Take the phone off her. A few minutes later, she's happy. You know, she's playing, she's doing other stuff. Um, I
Everything
mean,
in
it isn't
modesty.
overly helpful.
Everything
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah,
everything in
yeah,
moderation. So
yeah. That's it.
we
Absolutely,
covered a
absolutely.
lot of topics there, and I think with the stuff that you've got going on, I mean, I talk a lot about creativity on the podcast and how that sort of interacts with mental health. You've got you've got the gym thing; it's good for mental health to work out. You've got the creativity side, which is good to express yourself. All these good sort of positive affirmations that will hopefully someone will pick up on, and they can now look at themselves and go, I can be creative, because a guy from the SAS is writing comic books and he's allowing himself to express himself, and I can do the same. So hopefully this will send a good message out to the listeners, and I really appreciate
Yeah,
having
I
you
think
on, Ben.
literally, I think you can literally just. I know it sounds cliche, but I think you can literally do whatever you want. You know, as long as you can set that time or set those parameters to allow you to do that. You know, um, I think it's good. I'm 45 years old. I don't want to have a boss anymore. I've done that for too long. I want to be in a position now where I can do what I want to do and create those things. So I've set out for myself um, my mission to create it. So I run my own business. I did it so I'm no longer working to someone else's timetables. I can create those spaces and those times for myself to be creative, enjoy those bits. So,
That's what you got
no, I
to
think
do.
if I can do it,
Life's about happiness.
fucking solid, I think anyone can do it. Yeah, yeah, 100%, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Ben, I
Yeah.
really appreciate having you on.
Well,
Do you
thank
want
you.
to give a
Yeah,
quick
come
shout
down
to
for one of our
your?
dues in future, won't you?
Definitely. And if I've passed my motorbike
Cool.
test by then, I'll bring the bike. But I wanted to let you have the
Yeah, that'd be
opportunity
good, mate.
to give all the links and all the descriptions of where people can find your work and your comic, HR4K,
Thank you very much.
etc.
Yeah, so I think easiest one is Google both HR4K or Google Groundhammer. That's the easiest way to do it. If you Google HR4K, you can find the website. Um, there's bits and pieces on there. Just bear with us. We're still kind of pulling ourselves out the back end of COVID and lockdown, so we're kind of readjusting the business. But hopefully, we'll get back on track and get more events. And then, yeah, hopefully enjoy Groundhammer. Just as I said, just take it for what it is. It's a bit of fun. We're not taking it overly serious. And if you want something for your downstairs toilet, Groundhammer. There you go.
No, that's perfect, Ben. I really appreciate having you on. I'm looking
No,
forward to
thanks.
getting
Thanks for
those.
the opportunity. Yeah, thank you. It's very kind of you.
Yeah, and the last thing was the art rifles you were talking about.
Yes,
When's
sorry.
that?
Yeah, artist rifles. So Bear with us, but this is a project we'd like to do over the next year, and essentially we are going to be looking at not necessarily people who are in the military, but people who are inspired by military art or have a connection to the military in some way. And we're looking at all different aspects of art and being creative, and we want to kind of bring those people together. And if that's something which involves what you do, which is a mega, then obviously the more people can get involved in this, the better.
Perfect, Ben. Yeah, I really appreciate having you on. And I'm very blessed to have you on. I've wanted to have you on the podcast for a while, just so I could get that sort of lumberjack nod of approval.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I really appreciate it. Thanks for your patience. Cheers, dude.
Yeah,
look after yourself and Happy New Year.
And you, mate.
Hello, everyone. You're listening to Blue Pigment Podcast. If you want to become a patron of this show, please go to patreon.com/Blue Pigment. You will be helping me help the talent that I find along the way. Not only that, the podcast is an advocate for mental health and the positive message in which we want to send about mental health. So if you are a bit about that and you want to jump on board, then please become a patron at patreon.com/Blue Pigment. Would love to have you on board. And not only that, you'll get the chance to get some free stuff. I'll be giving another big giveaway soon. To find out what it is, go to patreon.com/Blue Pigment, become a patron and get yourself some free stuff.
Sponsoring the podcast today are Airborne Fit. Airborne Fit is more than just a fitness brand. It represents true team spirit and the coming together of members to create that family feeling. With the support and encouragement of each other, members become motivated, remain disciplined, and work with pure grit and determination to achieve their goals. Airborne's Fit motto is fitter, faster, stronger together. Check out airbornefit.com or visit their Instagram at airbornefitofficial.
Blue Pigment Podcast is sponsored by Huscarl. Go to huscarl.co.uk and use the discount code BLUEPIGMENT for 15% off. Get yourself some t-shirts, stickers, baseball caps, hoodies, printouts, and many more products from Huscarl. Blue Pigment Podcast, sponsored by Huscarl.
The opinions or views expressed on this podcast are solely of my own or the guests and do not represent the opinions or views of anybody else or the Ministry of Defence.
Shish kebab, Shawshank Redemption, Chicago! You're out of there!